Welcome back. We start a news bulletin from the World Health Organization, which has declared the coronavirus outbreak in China to be a global emergency. The announcement comes as the death toll from the disease rose to 213, with nearly 10,000 confirmed cases. This report will tell you more.
China's struggle with coronavirus is intensifying, with almost 2,000 new cases of the disease confirmed in the past 24 hours. It hasn't just stopped at China. The virus has now spread to 18 countries. The World Health Organization declaration is intended to stop or reduce the cross-border spread of disease.
I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern over the global outbreak of novel coronavirus. The main reason for this declaration is not because of what is happening in China, but because of what is happening in other countries. Our greatest concern is the potential for the virus to spread to countries with weaker health systems and which are ill prepared to deal with it.
On the other side of the world, France has recorded its 6th case of coronavirus. French Chief Health Officer Germain Salomon says they've sent a medical team to China.
There is a very large medical team that has left for Wuhan with infectologists, general practitioners, nurses, psychologists who are certainly going to make the welcoming arrangements at the airport and on the plane, since they are going to travel with them.
Many countries are advising their people against visiting China, while others have banned entry for travellers from Wuhan. Pakistan has also stopped flights in and out of China.
Meanwhile, in Italy, people on board a cruise ship have been allowed to disembark after a Chinese passenger with symptoms of coronavirus was tested negative. Health Ministry said samples were tested in Rome's Spallanzani hospital that specializes in infectious diseases. Earlier, Civitavecchia's mayor barred around 6,000 people from disembarking the ship until medical tests were carried out. Meanwhile, Italy's Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte confirmed first 2 cases of the virus in the country. Conte said the government has decided to close air traffic to and from China. After 47 years, the UK is about to leave the European Union today. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson will hold a cabinet meeting in Sunderland and later hail the dawn of a new era in his Brexit speech. In a historic address to the nation, the Prime Minister will promise that his work to reunite Britain begins immediately. Most EU laws will remain in force until the end of the year, while the country attempts to negotiate a permanent trade agreement with the EU. Later today, Brexiteers will gather in Parliament Square for a celebration and a countdown to the moment the UK leaves the bloc. In Brussels, the British flag will be removed from the EU institutions, with one union flag expected to be consigned to a museum. Moving on to Indian-occupied Kashmir, in another act of state terrorism, Indian troops have martyred 3 youth in occupied Kashmir. Police said they were killed after troops intercepted a truck at Ban Toll Plaza on Jammu-Srinagar highway. It said the security forces launched a cordon and search operation in the Nagrota area. Indian atrocities in occupied Kashmir have increased despite the ongoing cruel curfew. The valley is reeling under Indian curfew and communications blackout for the last 180 days. Moving on to the Middle East now. The UN Security Council has called for an immediate end to hostilities in Yemen. In a statement, the Council said the increase of fighting threatens the political process meant to end the war. The UN body has voiced concern at the significant growth of violence in Nehm and Al-Jauf regions and its effect on civilian life. The Council says reducing or stopping the fighting will create space for Yemeni political parties to begin negotiations. The statement comes after an emergency council meeting held on Tuesday at Britain's request. In the U.S., the Democrat-controlled House of Representatives has approved measures that reassert congressional authority over war powers. The House voted to repeal the 2002 Iraq War Authorization by 236 votes to 166. It also passed a plan to prevent tax dollars from being used to take military action against Iran without congressional approval. 3 weeks ago, another vote forced the White House to ask for approval before escalating tensions with Tehran. House Democrats say these measures will reassert Congress's constitutional authority over war powers. The House Republicans say Democrats acted irresponsibly by restricting the government's ability to protect American lives. In a related development, Iraq says it is resuming military operations with the US-led coalition, which were halted after the killing of Iranian Major General Qasem Soleimani. The coalition fighting ISIS suspended most operations on January 5th to focus on protecting its forces and bases. A military statement says the decision was made to use time before a new relationship is set up. It said joint operations include air support of Iraqi forces depending on need. Earlier, Iraq's Prime Minister Adel Abdul Mahdi had asked Washington to prepare for a troop withdrawal, but Washington rejected the call, saying the involvement of its troop is necessary for regional stability. Meanwhile, the US has imposed fresh sanctions on Iran's nuclear agency and its top official. The Treasury Department says Iran's atomic energy chief Ali Akbar Salehi and the organization itself have been blacklisted. The Trump administration said it will waive sanctions that bar non-US firms from working at Iranian nuclear sites. Responding to the development, Iran says the sanctioning of Tehran's nuclear chief shows Washington's despair. Spokesperson for IAEO, Behrouz Kamalwandi, said Tehran's civilian nuclear program will continue with full force. Australia's capital territory, Canberra, has declared a state of emergency while massive bushfires rage south of the city. Officials say it is the worst fire threat in nearly 20 years, with the main blaze burning over 18,000 hectares. Australian Capital Territory Chief Minister Andrew Barr says the emergency will remain until Canberra is at risk. Officials said the searing heat and the dry winds will worsen bushfire conditions in New South Wales and Victoria states. Meanwhile, Australia's government has increased supplies of natural gas and renewable energy as part of a $2 billion deal with New South Wales to cut carbon emissions. Since September, Australia has been fighting bushfires that have killed 33 people and 1 billion animals. Spain's government says it will begin talks to resolve the Catalan political conflict before elections are held in the region. In a statement, the government said it wants to restate its commitment to the talks, even though present conditions are not suitable. Earlier, the government postponed negotiations until after the polls. The talks were a precondition for the Catalan separatist party ERC to aid Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's recent investiture. The PM's decision to delay talks drew sharp criticism from Catalan politicians. Support from the ERCs is crucial if the government's budget proposal are to be approved by the parliament. The UK has released $10 million in funding to the United Nations to support Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. The UN's World Food Programme in Bangladesh welcomed the new contribution from the UK's Department for International Development. The UN said under the program, refugees can now buy a variety of food items from World Food Programme outlets across the camps. It said Rohingya families will receive $9 per person per month to spend at e-voucher outlets. Amnesty International says over 750,000 Rohingya refugees have fled Myanmar to Bangladesh. The Myanmar army launched a crackdown on the minority Muslim community in 2017. The UN envoy for Libya, Ghassan Salameh, says he feels deeper anger and disappointment at the growing conflict in Libya. Speaking at a UNSC meeting, Salam said countries present at the Berlin conference were directly or indirectly fueling the violence. He said Berlin was a serious effort to unify an incoherent international community and give hope to suffering Libyans. He urged Libya's warring parties and their foreign sponsors to work on a ceasefire. Salam said recent developments on the ground mean the truce exists in name only. His statement was prompted by the increasing violence despite the truce agreed at the conference on January 19th. The parties had agreed to respect an arms embargo imposed on Libya by the UN Security Council. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, 24 people have been killed in attacks by rebels. Officials say the Allied Democratic Forces militia targeted the towns of Mentumbi, Memove, Malolia and Avili in North Kivu province. They said 11 people were shot and killed in the village of Mentumbi, while attackers set fire to vehicles in Memove. Earlier on Wednesday, 36 people died in a suspected rebel attack in Beni region. Rebels have killed over 300 civilians since Congo's military opened an offensive against armed groups in the area last October. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has visited the southeastern flood-hit areas where the death toll stands at 54. Officials said the region has recorded the heaviest rain in 110 years. Disaster officials say 45 people are dead in Minas Gerais, while 9 others were killed in neighboring Espírito Santo. Officials said other states in the region have also registered damage and number of missing people has reached 21. Nearly 33,000 people have been evacuated as over 100 towns declared a state of emergency. Belo Horizonte recorded 180 millimeters of rain in 3 hours, causing severe damage to dozens of neighborhoods. In northwest Nigeria, gold mining is the only viable livelihood for local people. Despite the risk of lead poisoning and the constant threat of violence from armed groups, residents continue to make a dangerous living. In the state of Zamfara, medics say lead poisoning has caused the death of 500 children in the past 10 years. This report describes what is happening.
Zamfara State is one of Nigeria's richest areas in terms of mineral wealth. And yet, the people here in the country's northwest are among its poorest. Mining is one of the few reliable sources of income, but it's high-risk work that brings scant reward. These workers earn just a couple of dollars a day.
I need this work to survive, as I couldn't find any jobs in town. My current boss gave me a call. He said, "Come and join us in this business." And I started working for him.
Last year, the Nigerian government introduced a regional ban on mining, hoping to curb the armed groups, but people have carried on regardless. As well as working illegally, gold miners also run the risk of lead poisoning. This toxic metal is abundant in the earth of Zamfara. Its vapours escape into the air during mining, often near residential areas. Each week, this clinic treats children suffering from its effects. In some patients, the levels of lead in the blood are 250 times higher than the limit tolerated by many doctors.
The way to address this once and for all is to ensure, again, that exposure is completely curtailed. No residential activity when it comes to mineral processing, and that all the miners that are mining should practice good hygiene.
In the past decade, more than 500 children have died from lead poisoning. Though officially banned, mining looks set to remain a vital part of this region's economy, and much more remains to be done to regulate safety standards in the industry and to end the ongoing conflict surrounding access to the mines.
In Egypt, archaeologists have discovered centuries-old tombs belonging to the priests in southern governorate of Menia. The Ministry of Antiquities says 20 more coffins unearthed at the site at Al-Ghuraifa date back to 2,500 years. More on the discovery in this report.
Centuries ago, Amarna, which is now the Egyptian governorate of Menia, was briefly the country's capital during the life of Pharaoh Akhenaten. Now, archaeologists survey and dig dozens of sites in the ancient city. One of their discoveries has huge potential: 16 communal tombs belonging to the high priests of a god called Jihuji.
These are 9 sarcophagi that are intact, not opened before. We opened them and found the mummies and the amulets, 9 sarcophagi in shafts.
Secretary General of the Antiquities Council, Mustafa Muziri, describes what has been found so far.
16 tombs and 20 stone sarcophagus, very good quality of limestone. And at the same time, we found more than 10,000 statues of Shawapti made out of faience. We found also 8 sets of the canopic jars.
Many hope these sites will soon have a new life and bustle by attracting tourists and the much-needed revenue they bring.
In Portugal, a small district of the capital city Lisbon, once labored under a reputation as a no-go zone, became because of its high crime rate. Now it has been transformed and has become a tourist magnet. Find out what happened in this report.
Quinta do Mocho district in Lisbon used to be considered one of the city's most dangerous suburbs, plagued by violence and drugs, where even taxis refused to go. But street art has transformed the housing project and the lives of its 2,800 inhabitants, with guided visits now organized in the former ghetto.
These works of art in our neighborhood have allowed us to project ourselves into the world. People come here, they want to know us, to hear our stories, to understand our world. Before, we were like invisible territory. Nobody saw us. Nobody was interested in us. Today, all that has changed.
In 2014, the town hall organized the district's first street art festival and offered to paint some of the building's walls. Since then, the event has taken place every year and the district now boasts more than 120 murals. About 100 Portuguese and international artists have taken part in turning this neighborhood into an open-air street art gallery.
I think it's very important, both for those who come and for those who live here. It's good that there is awareness on both sides that things can be different and that all of us can contribute to creating a different atmosphere.
The murals have also raised awareness on topics like racial discrimination, children's rights, multiculturalism, and justice.
China's official manufacturing activity has slipped in January with a reduction in production and new orders. The National Bureau of Statistics report says China's Purchasing Managers Index fell to 50 points, down from 50.2 the previous month. The 50-point mark separates expansion from contraction on a monthly basis. The NBS has warned the survey does not include the impact of the coronavirus on the economy. The European Commission says economic sentiment improved in January as confidence in the industrial and construction sectors rose. The Commission says the economic sentiment indicator rose nearly 2 points to over 101 in the bloc. Amongst the largest euro area economies, the ESI soared in Germany by 2 points and France by 1.5 points. In contrast, the Commission said confidence in services increased significantly while it declined in retail. Stock markets in Europe are trading mixed as investors recover from coronavirus fears. Frankfurt's DAX and CAC 40 in Paris are trading fractionally higher. This comes as the Eurozone fourth quarter GDP data is set to be released later in the day. London's FTSE 100 has also lost a fraction as the UK is set to officially leave the European Union. In Asia, sales Kospi closed over 1% lower. Nikkei 225 gained nearly 1% as shares of index heavyweight robot maker Fanuc rose over 1.5%. Meanwhile, international Brent crude oil price has surged over 1%, paring early gains. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.